talking about leadership, is it wise to place passion in compassion? An example of such as a person would be Vedanta Shiva. Yeah, isn't that interesting that compassion has passion in it? Woo! In Buddhism, I actually originally got into non-duality through Buddhism, so I have a bit more of context there when it comes to traditional archetypes. Now, in Buddhism, the wisdom, one of the Buddhas of wisdom, Prajna Paramita, is female, and the Buddha of compassion is male. I always loved that the female Buddha is wisdom. There's lots of different Buddhas, but these are two main ones. And the male one, so Avalokiteshvara, is male. Yeah. I think that our society is in recovery from narcissistic abuse. I think that our kings and queens, I'm not sure about our queen that we've just had in England, but I think if you go back and you look particularly in England in the history of the kings, they did some terrible things. I'm sure they also did some great things, but you know, the idea that they thought it was justified that they collect taxes and lived in this immense amount of wealth and owned all the property. You know, that's quite a big thing to do. It's quite an interesting thing to do. Because, like, if I was given that opportunity, I don't know if I'd be that happy about doing it, because I'm not sure it's balanced. Like, I don't think it's a balanced person. I think that when you become the leader, you're a center figure, and therefore you need to protect yourself because people don't really understand leadership or someone being famous. So if, like, Johnny Depp, you know, walked down the street in England, that he would be mobbed by people, and they're not meaning to harm him, but because he's famous. I mean, fame is a really weird thing. They think, you know, we've only really been having fame in newspapers for 200 years. Before that, we kind of maybe vaguely knew about the king and queen of our country, but it was all through word of mouth and gossip and storytelling, rather than like this instant news and knowing about their personal life. But if you say, look at someone like Henry VIII in England, most probably you don't know it if you're not English, but he was a king who had 8 wives, and like, I mean, he beheaded like 3 or 4 of his wives. He set up a whole new church so he could divorce legally. Yeah, he did horrendous things. And so my perspective in it is that I think that our society is in recovery, but it might not be recovery, they might not be recovering, but hopefully recovery from its intense narcissistic abuse from leaderships. Like, so from a psychopath, sorry, sometimes my words. So, you know, Henry VIII, he might have been a psychopath. Like, when you look at what he did and the way he tortured people, like, I know that people think, oh, if we torture people, then they won't do bad things, and that's the perspective on it. So it's like the greater good story, but it's also horrific. Like, what sort of person can sit through and watch that? Like, be the person that says it's right. Like, the audience member, they're all in trauma, and they're all, you know, if they don't do it, they might be killed. So there's all that. But the person actually has the power and says, yes, this is the thing we should do, you know. This person that we're torturing has come from absolute poverty, has stolen, so we should therefore chop off his hands and it will teach everybody else. Like all types of things, like going to war and fighting over ridiculous amounts of land. We can say that other people were like that, so we had to be like that. So there's all types of like exceptions. But in the end, that leader did that. That leader chose to do that. And I suspect that when somebody is born into the royal family and had to be a king or a leader, that they were treated in a way which created immense amount of narcissism in that individual. And then the followers of that are under narcissistic abuse. And the reason that I think that our society is recovering from narcissistic abuse is if we look in America, and everything I'm saying is subjective and it's just my ideas and my ramblings, like take it or leave it. But if we look in America, like Donald Trump is most probably a sociopath or an extreme narcissist. Like there was a book out by one of his nieces, which it could be that she, had a vendetta against him, but it could actually be an accurate portrayal. Like his behavior was very dubious, the way he spoke about women, the way he spoke about the environment, politics, his own success, how much tax he paid, like what he did towards the end, where he kind of like encouraged his followers to like storm Parliament building because he lost, like not being able to accept that he lost, like saying it was all corrupt. It's always possibility these things could be true, but if you really understand narcissistic abuse, that's very typical. These types of behaviors, like he falls into all the categories of it, that he's using like power in a very like grandiose way, and he's not interested in empathy and how other people feel. He's just interested in the accumulation of things for himself. So with him, the reason that I think we're recovering is because the people that ended up voting for him was the people that he was fucking up the butt the most. Sorry for saying that in such a rude way. So the people that voted for him, and it was the same happened in England, is the people that would, in the long run, benefit the least from that type of leadership were the ones that voted for him. And that's very typical of narcissistic abuse. If we take it back to like relationships, if you've been abused by a narcissistic parent in childhood, there is often a strong possibility that that child will then go on and find a narcissistic partner. Like it's what you're used to. And so what I'm implying is like the working class, so the main majority of people have been under this spell of narcissism, of like abuse, and it's still in their DNA, it's still in their family structures, and they're not understanding it cognitively to break away from it. So therefore, when a narcissist comes along, they kind of like idolize them and fall in love with them and glorify them and put them on that pedestal. The same happened in England, like this immense working class vote for Boris Johnson. I'm sure there's a lot more complicated things happening because there is like immigration and the taking away of working class jobs, and I'm not even sure if it's PC to say working class anymore, so please forgive me. I don't even know how you say all these things. Like, so the factories going over to Asia, so there is like a loss of jobs, and then immigration, and they think that it's because of immigration that the problem is that they can't get jobs, all these types of things. So there is like this promise. But I have a feeling that because we've had so many, for thousands of years, narcissistic and psychopathic leaders, that we're kind of still spellbound by it as a society. So what happened in Germany, which is interesting, after Hitler, which is most probably narcissist or sociopath, is that German people, from what I understand, is that they educate themselves into, or they're educated to not pick really flamboyant leaders now. So someone like Angela Merkel, I'm not even sure who the new one is, but Angela Merkel, like she wasn't very flamboyant. Like she's a really kind of like non-charismatic person, very steady, very stable, but she doesn't go out there making big diversive proclamations. Sorry, I can't say the word currently. You know, she just is very reserved. I'm not saying that she was a great leader, but it's interesting that there was that shift. Apparently it's because of like this education of what Hitler did. It's this like recognition of like how he took into power. I don't know if that's true. This is just what I've been told from German friends. So they're less likely to fall for like a Boris Johnson or a Trump character. I don't know how true that is. Super interesting, like all these projections and these prejudices of what we look for and want out of a leader. And I feel like the wisest thing to do is to pick a fair person that's got empathy but not too overly empathetic, otherwise they wouldn't do things, but isn't like really strongly charismatic. But also you look in their eyes and you have a sense that they have a good heart, but they're not trying to do it for solely their own growth. Like they say about the Queen of England, that she was very committed to this idea of serving the people in the best way she could. So, yeah. I think the great thing about getting into non-duality is you begin to see all these beliefs and these ideals. Like you begin to unpeel yourself and see, I have all these projections, I have these needs and these wants. I want a leader to be like that, I want a partner to be like this.